I'll save my book on consultancy as lowly for another time. But
it's just you playing a small violin on the cover. I mean, I need to dial you through that up, I think. Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Off Script. Today we're talking about Tech Misconceptions Part 2, focusing on leadership.
Hello.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I am doing okay.
Good.
Surviving the week.
We're going to talk about tech misconceptions today. So we did a live event version of this, and it was really good.
Really good.
If a bit boozy, but it was good to have people in the room, and they were contributing as much as we were, which was great.
Yes, lots of good honesty.
And yeah, we basically ran through a bunch of misconceptions. I think there was 11 in total.
Yep.
Some of the conversations sort of made those overlap, but it was good. It was really good.
Really
we're kind of going to do a little bit of a wrap up.
Yes.
And chat through each of the points, because it's moved on a bit from when we did the original podcast, which was other misconceptions. This is more leadership focused.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, this was driven out of a conversation with Work Digital. So James Westwood was very kind to kind of collaborate with us on an event, and he was really keen to highlight some of the misconceptions in leadership. And we had more to say on the topic than I thought we would, actually.
Yeah, it was really good, and lots of good feedback from the room, as we mentioned. But our first misconception was leadership is the only route for progression.
Yes, this was a good one.
Got some good responses from the room, but the kind of angle we were going for was having this kind of dual track thing, because what tends to happen in companies is you get really good at a thing, and then because you're good at that thing, you get made to do a completely different thing, which is, if you think of it like that, it sounds incorrect.
Well, it is incorrect.
Yeah.
I think so. We talked a lot about the kind of IC, the individual contributor track, alongside the managerial track, essentially. And usually the IC tracks go from kind of associate or intern, kind of beginner to expert level. And then with the management track, typically you'll see, manager, maybe head of, VP sort of stuff, all the way up to possibly exec level, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to paint the picture that there are two distinctive tracks that may have people that kind of fluctuate in between, but ultimately they're different skill sets with different levels of progression.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for Parallax, we're still quite small, so 50, 60 odd people. So our tracks need to be quite well defined, but you're right, people do sort of flip between them. It's definitely more tech leaning ones, which was, sort of that sort of tech principle kind of path versus a leadership path, which are very different.
It's also a good tool. So it's a good tool for a number of reasons. It's not just for stuff like writing job descriptions and performance management. It's actually a good tool to really help your staff understand what they want to do. As people grow in their roles, you can see that sometimes people get stagnant and kind of frustrated that there's not the growth that they're looking for. So it's a good tool to go, okay, well, what are you looking for out of this? What do you want to do? What do you want to spend your time doing here? And what gives you satisfaction?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about having that conversation, which we do in a more structured way through PDPs, but it does happen outside of that.
Nice.
Outside the one-to-ones, obviously within the Agile teams, but that sort of dual track even more than just two, isn't it? Tracks of progression.
Yeah, I mean, this is often a space that isn't. I don't think people always give it the time of day. The investing into these tracks properly, giving it the proper thought and consideration, it will save you money in the long run, because you'll ensure that your kind of team can grow and feel confident that they're achieving their goals. And it's definitely worth investing time to get it right, because if you don't, your staff will become kind of frustrated at the lack of progression and just understanding where they can go in the company and what they can do there.
Yeah, absolutely. The next misconception was, let's not worry about the team dynamics. Good code is all that matters. This does happen quite a bit. or you hear about it quite a bit. You have that sort of star employee who's also an arsehole.
Yeah.
And you put up with it because the code's really good.
Yeah.
And actually, overall, maybe it's slowing the team down.
Yeah, that sort of God mode kind of setup in a team is really it's quite toxic. It can breed a lot of bad behaviours, and it can really disjoint the team, can't it?
Yeah, definitely. The dynamics of the team is actually the most important thing, because that helps everyone move quickly together.
Yeah.
And if you want to go far, you need everyone working together.
Yeah.
Rather than just those one shot like hero moments.
Yeah.
From one team member, which then everyone else has to scramble around and fix up and do all the bits they didn't think about, like productionizing it. And,
or making it accessible, or testing it. And
or making it actually work sometimes.
Yeah, it's actually quite good timing for this recording of this episode, because we've done a couple of other episodes before this around building communities and kind of emotional states and the way that teams interact with each other. And I think this is actually a big part of it. The culture side of things, how the team communicates and interacts, is a really important part that, again, you have to spend time investing in. It doesn't just happen overnight, and it is an organic thing.
And these sort of fluffier, hard to measure things are more important than you think. So some teams that are full of sort of analytic brained people, they'll go, well, our linting works, and we've got all the story points done, and the security audit checks are all passing and everything's good, but you might actually not be hitting the goals of the project. You can make all the numbers right, and you're actually doing the things you need to be doing to make a good product.
I mean, all the CI stuff might be passing, but if the team hate you and the product doesn't work, it's not great.
Yeah. I mean, you can notice stuff like that from the outside, but from within, it's like that slow boiling frog sometimes, isn't it?
Definitely. And I think with teams that are so like goal orientated, if it's just like get these tickets delivered and then something happens, then it can be quite hard to invest in the softer skills and the softer areas of like delivery.
Yeah, that ticket taker, I've done my bit sort of attitude it can happen and is quite toxic. Split everything into small chunks. You do that, I'll do this.
Yeah.
Why does it not all work together? Oh, because you're not talking to each other.
But we've all been there, right? We've all had tickets assigned to us, and we've just been like, right, let's
Bosh
get
it out. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Speaking from experience.
Yeah. I miss those days, coding.
Yeah. I mean, I still do, probably to the dismay of my team, but still. Third misconception is, and this happens a lot with Agile stuff, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I mean, who needs to think about the risks now anyway? So this is very much sort of placing the truck in front of you as you go, like that Wallace and Gromit scene, isn't it?
Yeah.
And a bit of that's good, but thinking about longer term risks, I think, is quite important. And as I mentioned in the night, I do love a risk register.
Yeah. You're fun at parties.
Fun at parties. Though maybe in the moment I'm not very process driven, I do quite like hashing out a big old risk register and get everything out there.
Yeah, we talked a lot about how, that sort of reactive, you ain't going to need it sort of mindset is super important in Agile kind of thinking and in terms of like streamlined delivery.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you have to kind of throw out the responsibility of looking through things properly, having a risk register, understanding exactly what challenges you're going to face towards the kind of delivery of the project.
Yeah, because if you've got all those things written down and you know that there is a risk on the horizon, but you think, well, that's an acceptable risk, you might be able to make that decision in your head. But if you don't communicate it, then some legal problem comes up or some technical problem comes up later, and you're like, oh, we've thought about that and dismissed it. If you don't document that, you're screwed, because insurer won't pay out, or the team members will be pissed off at you, or whatever.
Yeah,
it can't just be one person making decisions for the rest of the team.
Especially hard in really innovative spaces and projects. You're doing a lot of work with AI at the moment, where regulation and everything's still being kind of defined quite heavily.
Yeah.
Thinking about the consequences of some of these things before you've even written a line of code is super important.
Yeah, really, and it helps you think through what you're actually doing.
Yeah.
And you never know, you'll sort of inadvertently build some of the protections of these risks into the work that you're doing because you've surfaced it to everyone in the team.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just hide it, then it's going to end pretty badly.
Yeah, definitely.
The next misconception is you need to be the best engineer in the team.
I wish I was, but I'm.
Yeah. No, you don't. To be a leader, you don't need to be the best engineer. That doesn't make sense. That kind of goes back to the multi-track thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody that's good at people stuff or operational stuff, not necessarily good at technical stuff.
But also, even if you are, which you're probably not, it's not about you. It's not about you as a leader showcasing those skills to the team. You need to take your ego out of it and ultimately let those team members establish themselves and own the project.
Yeah, let them fail to a point, let them learn.
Yeah, which can be hard because if you've already kind of trod those tracks and made the mistakes, it's quite hard, isn't it, to allow that to play out. But within reason, I think it's important that people learn through failure. And that can be hard to watch if you've already made those mistakes. Unless, of course, it's like deleting a production database, in which case you probably shouldn't allow it to play through.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about all those in our live podcast episode in a few weeks. The next misconception is technology skills trump company culture. And this kind of feeds into the team dynamic stuff that we were talking about earlier. And it shouldn't just be the tech skill stuff. It shouldn't be like we're doing this because the tech's there or because this person's really talented. You should have a focus on company culture as well.
Yeah. I think when people use the term kind of culture fit and company culture, I think what they're actually saying is they're a good blend of cultural fit and they can do the kind of expertise of the role. Yeah. Because, just having an amazing engineer, back to what we were saying earlier, really, having an amazing engineer that can just smash out tickets and deliver the best tech isn't going to be the only thing that you're asking of that person. And there are loads of soft skills that contribute to that person being a valuable member of the team, not just churning out code.
Yeah. I've only just started thinking about the term culture fit and how it can sometimes hide a lot of bias as well. Like if you're scoring candidates and on culture fit, are you actually overfitting? Are you then disregarding people of different backgrounds as well?
Well, yeah. I mean, in terms of D&I, right, you're essentially looking for people that are similar to you because you get on with them.
But actually, diversity, both neurodiversity and racial, is very important. Gender in building like well-rounded teams that can find risks in places that you wouldn't usually look.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, a team with different lived experiences is a more kind of well-rounded, valuable team in my eyes. And yeah, it's an interesting one. I would definitely preference, I think it's almost even weighting, isn't it? Like, are they technically great, but also are they going to fit in and understand this team and work with this team and support the growth of this team? Like, I think it is a hugely important aspect.
Yeah, I mean, early on in Parallax days, going back 14 years ago, we used to take people out for a drink as part of their interview process almost. Yeah. Like second interview, just go to the pub. And thinking back, that worked worked well for us when we were 4 people. And it's a very, very different company and culture. But now that obviously excludes people where they don't drink. Drinking's not part of their culture, and it's actually quite tech bro-y, isn't it? Sort of like...
Yeah, the important thing to state there is it was all good intentioned. It's not like you were trying to exclude people. It's just that was your way of getting to know someone.
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing, but it's also, it's a good thing. The more we learn and the more we grow, the more we realize that was maybe not something that we need to do anymore.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, we've tweaked Parallax's culture as it goes. Yeah. We used to have an onboarding shot of drink. Which
I remember that.
Yeah, it was probably inadvisable.
I think you made me do that shot even though I wasn't on board. So.
You're working from the office.
That was
You have to do the shot.
No, but, these are important things. I think I stated in the community talk that I did, alcohol played a role in the stage of the early events, and it was an alcohol heavy environment, and we live and learn and realize that that's not necessarily something we want to keep going. So
yeah, no, it's all part of learning and growing up, isn't it?
Yeah.
The next misconception: more developers means more velocity. So yeah, as you add more devs, you get more stuff done, right?
Absolutely.
Well, that's that one. That's not actually a misconception. Great, we just chuck money at every problem.
Yeah. If only it was as simple as like a slider with just more devs.
Yeah, add one more person, especially right at the end of the project when you need it. We'll just stick a couple more devs on, it'll be fine.
Just right at the end.
Yeah.
There's no better example of the human challenge that we're faced with projects by throwing more people at a problem. It's just not that simple, is it?
The number of pathways of communication just grow exponentially, and getting even 3 people to agree with what's going on between you all is hard enough, let alone 10.
Yeah. Oh, God.
So, yeah, as you add more devs, more problems. And sometimes there's a point in that number where it actually massively slows you down.
Yeah, especially in circumstances where you're probably bringing in like augmented team support or consultancies or contractors. As you said, at a late stage in like a project where a project might be failing or struggling to be delivered, you don't want to be necessarily onboarding people at that stage where why are you doing it this way? Why are you doing it that way? Oh, the linting isn't right, or the tests, are you doing it that way? No, it's like, no, look.
Yeah, we had a contractor brought on by the client. We're doing blended teams for this project, and they were delivering some key features, and the client was like, really happy because they were getting delivered. And we were just like running around mopping up all the shit. But it crashes in this way, and it does this, and it doesn't scale for this reason. And it's like, you end up, because they're not fully part of the team, you can't call them out, and you don't want to like chuck them under the bus, but at the same time, you still have to fix it.
Yeah, it's really tricky in that environment actually, where you've got kind of a few different bridges into teams that you're working with that aren't necessarily part of the same team, or if you're working on like a project that's distributed across a wider set of teams on a shared code base, it gets super complex.
Time zone differences as well, that's super hard.
Yeah,
because sometimes a quick 10-minute chat's all you need, but if they're the other side of the world and that's your 6 a.m. or whatever. And
then you rely on maybe more written communication, differences in written communication across different cultures, and more of those passive aggressive PR reviews. It can be tricky. It can be really hard.
Yeah, what should have been one dev day is then 20.
Yeah,
super hard. Solution.
I saw you going into a space of torment there.
Yeah, you saw the pain behind my eyes.
Taking you back.
Yeah, it's okay. It's almost the weekend. Misconception 7. Documentation is less important for agile teams.
I mean, it's interesting, the connection between documentation and agile. So I think we talked about it on the night of agile not meaning that you can really cut corners on some of these things. Agile can become a bit of an excuse sometimes, can't it?
Yeah, it's prioritize working code over documentation.
Yeah,
but not in spite of it. Like, you don't want to just churn out code.
Yeah.
It is tricky. People hate writing docs. I'm hoping that AI will come along and do a good job. At the moment, it seems like it's not quite there yet.
No.
There is an auto-gen documentation thing that I ran on a repo. It wasn't bad, but it misses the why a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Like, it can see the code, but it doesn't know why you've written it.
The intent's important, isn't it?
Yeah. And maybe you could derive that from the commit messages if they were good. Commit messages probably aren't good.
It's the hardest thing, one of the hardest things to get right, like thorough commit messages.
Yeah.
It's interesting though, because the problem with documentation is how quickly it stagnates, right? It goes stale quickly.
Yeah. I think I quite like it being in the repo.
Yeah.
Especially if it's about the code. I think that makes sense.
Yeah. We had a CI check on a project where basically would check whether the related Markdown document had been updated when certain files were touched.
Oh, I like that.
Which is good and bad because it's not always a hard and fast rule that the docs need updating if you're touching something, but because they end up with like horrible white space changes and stuff on, But it's a good rule of thumb. Like if you're trying to update the code, are you keeping the docs in sync?
Nice. Yeah, I like that a lot. Misconception 8. Agile development means no plan. So yeah, you see this a lot where teams will just work sprint to sprint and they're not thinking about the future. This is, quite common, but it's nice to sort of roadmap at least a little bit further into the future.
Yeah.
And good planning is actually crucial for project success. There's things that are outside the project team's control, things like budget approvals or getting an outside company to do pen testing or whatever it is. It might be like App Store approvals or something that just needs some forethought and you need to put it into a plan.
Yeah.
I don't like slinging a Gantt chart together for everything, but also some milestones, some dates, to hit this date, we need to do this then. Some of that thinking is useful.
It can be good to map out dependencies, as you said as well, I think. I think the thing that gets overplayed with the whole Agile kind of manifesto is the dynamic nature of it. Like, it's good that you have the flexibility based on your information to figure out what the next step is, but you do still need to have a kind of overarching plan, right?
Yeah, flexibility where you need it, but not just flexibility for flexibility's sake.
Yeah.
If you know that you need ISO 27001 approval, don't just sling it in the backlog and hope it trickles to the top at the right time for you to get it through the door with the product launch. Not going to work, is it? If you know you need it and you know you need to do some very basic planning for it, there's no point being flexible. You're just adding chaos for no reason.
Yeah, that compliance angle is a really good example, actually, in terms of if you know you have to work on a compliance certification or something like that, you'll need to do some things within the code base maybe or within the infrastructure to support that.
Yeah.
You want to know that from the start. You don't want to just retrofit that in, right?
Yeah, and you'll be relying on other people to check it and sign it off.
Yeah.
That are external to the organisation and not on your stand-ups.
Yeah.
And they don't give a shit if you hit your story points.
No, absolutely not.
Just enough planning to make the plan hang together, I think. And then there's no point speccing out software design in 3 months out, like into the minute detail when you don't know the detail. Which is what the Agile Manifesto is trying to do, is trying to avoid, is that whole big spec document of doom that no one ever reads.
Yeah.
Not completely fly by the seat of your pants cowboy project delivery.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Cool. That brings us to the next point. Misconception number 9, all leaders are extroverts.
So we talked about this, ironically, at an event where we were on stage.
Yes, we did.
But I think it's important because it doesn't mean that circumstance, that situation comes naturally to people. I've worked and still am uncomfortable in public speaking environments still, to be honest.
But I do well. You do a pretty good job.
Thanks. Yeah, might be the Negronis, but but yeah, no, I think it's just one of those situations where you can't assume that everyone is as comfortable being kind of outwardly facing than others, right?
Yeah, I'd say I'm probably more introvert leaning, but yeah, public speaking does scare me, as it does everyone. But I think once you're up there and doing stuff, it's good. In terms of leadership, introversion versus extrovert, I think it feels like as introverted people might have to work a little harder to get their voice across. But I guess it plays into our last podcast episode around that strength deployment inventory, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the way in which people communicate in a public environment is very individual, and I think you're not introvert or extrovert, are you? It's a sliding scale. I think you can't make an assumption that everyone is comfortable in a leadership position, presenting, talking openly. It's obviously you have to do it. You have to be visible and you have to be vocal about your opinions. But it doesn't always come naturally, does it?
No, and no, being an introvert doesn't preclude you from being a leader either, I don't think. But even if it doesn't come naturally, you just need to work on it.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a good few examples in history of introvert leaders, I think. To be honest, I'd actually maybe say, like, one of the most famous leaders being Steve Jobs possibly was an introvert, actually, if you look at, I don't know.
Yeah.
If you look at some of his behaviours, I wouldn't say he's like a solid extrovert. I think he was very confident in what he wanted to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, what if you got, like, Barack Obama, self-confessed introvert? Elon Musk reckons he's an introvert, but I'm not sure about that.
I'm not responding to that.
We tried to keep Elon Musk chat to a minimum during these, but he creeps in somehow. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's a good example. I think people who are sure and certain of what they want to achieve aren't necessarily extroverts, and I think it's good to not conflict the two.
Yeah, definitely. Misconception number 10: leadership is lonely.
I think we were in reasonable agreement on the night that it can be.
Yeah.
It can be really hard making decisions that people don't agree with, or people don't understand the bigger picture behind things.
Yeah, and I guess it can feel lonely if you're not able to engage the team in your decision-making process. I think someone in the audience had a really good point, which is that it's not just the team you're managing. Actually, other leaders in other areas of the business are part of your team as well.
Yeah.
And they can and should be supporting you in that and making it feel less lonely. Yeah,
I think some of the loneliest times I've felt like that is in leadership teams where I've not felt an affinity with my team.
Yeah.
And my team being the leadership team there, not the team I looked after.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard. You've got to constantly fight your corner for something, or you feel misaligned. It's exhausting, isn't it?
Yeah, and especially when you were coming in as an external consultant, and you can't really show the same vulnerability in the same way. Yeah. Because you're like, well, you're meant to fucking sort it all out. And that can weigh quite hard, I suppose.
Yeah, I think I'll save my book on consultancy as lonely for another time. But
it's just you playing a small violin on the cover. I mean, I need to dial 3 that up, I think.
Yeah. It's difficult, isn't it? It's as you said, it's very hard to show vulnerability in that scenario. But I think what makes leadership good also makes it bad, right? You have the ability to influence change. You have the ability to really pave the way for exciting things, but that comes at a cost sometimes, and it's hard.
Yeah. I guess people looking up to leadership, they might see us playing a tiny violin. Like, obviously you could just sort it out, but it's sometimes a bit more difficult than that. Yeah,
definitely.
It kind of feeds into our next misconception around you don't need a mentor or support or peers, which is when we started talking about the mentorship group that James Westwood runs at work, which is mainly towards sort of software engineering leadership.
Yes.
But it would really recommend checking that out.
Yeah.
I'm on the 3rd round now.
Yes, you are, aren't you?
I've got another session today, actually. And you get out what you put in. I think we had a quick chat about it.
I need to. So I've been terrible. I've said to James, I'll do it. I'm going to do the January cohort, I think, which is soon. But I think you can never stop learning, right? You can never stop learning more about yourself and the lessons that you learn along the way, and how that can help support other people, and vice versa. You never know what you're going to learn from other people. You will never know everything, and there's no harm in having this mutual mentoring setup.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll be surprised how similar a lot of the problems are that people are having. So it's good, and it's good just to chat through, because until you start, it's like that rubber duck debugging thing. Until you actually start talking through some of this stuff, you don't actually realise how much it's affecting you. And
totally.
I can see the pain in your eyes already. You're just like reminiscing on past problems.
Took me back to a place there. Yeah. Well, it's a problem shared is not always a problem solved, but it definitely goes a long way to helping you figure out what the next step is.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. I thought that was a really good session, and we tracked through most of the stuff that we spoke about on the night, but a few other bits. But yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks for listening to Off Script. As always, hit subscribe and we'll see you for the next episode.